I'm someone who doesn't believe in God because I demand evidence for anything before I'll actually believe in it, and no amount of playing with words is going to change that. So let's do this. So how many of you are familiar with MrMinistryMan? He's made a couple of videos that absolutely have to be disagreed with, because his reasoning is that he can play around with words and change what we believe or don't.
Okay, let's just get one thing out in the open before we start here. I do understand that quite literally, atheists do exist. It would be completely foolish to deny that. The real question is, should they exist? Does it make logical sense for an atheist to be an atheist?
Well, an atheist is just someone who doesn't believe that God exists, who's not been convinced by the people who claim that God does exist. So, yeah, that makes perfect sense, frankly.
First of all, there are two types of atheists in this world. There are the hard or strong atheist, and there's the soft atheist. You might have another set of terms to differentiate between these two groups, but I think these work for our purposes today.
I call myself an agnostic atheist. Agnostic, gnosis, knowledge. I lack knowledge, therefore agnostic. And atheist, theism, theist, belief. I am not a believer, therefore I'm an atheist. So I'm an agnostic atheist, one who lacks knowledge of God's existence and one who lacks belief in God's existence.
And first I will be addressing the hard atheist, but I will get to the other group as well. The hard atheist is defined as someone who would say there is no God.
Well, here's the thing. I'm effectively one of those, but not actually one of those. You see, I'm not 100% certain that there is no God. But there are so many freaking nines after the decimal point and the 99.9% sure that I am there is no God, that I might as well effectively be 100% sure. Oh, there's always a chance someone could prove me wrong. I'm just not holding out a whole lot of hope for that. Not that I want it, I'm just saying it doesn't seem very likely.
The problem with this is that the atheist has just made an absolute statement of truth. And where or what is their basis for this absolute? I mean, it can't be science, because a discipline that's based in the physical realm could not possibly lay down an absolute about a subject that is so intrinsically rooted in the spiritual.
Are you kidding me? Do I have to list off the things your God is alleged to have done in the physical world? Where do I even begin? Creating the universe, maybe? Creating humankind? Impregnating virgins? Water to wine? Loaves and fishes? Global floods? I mean, come on, there are so many things that your God is alleged to have done in and to this world that we could potentially prove if there was evidence for it. I mean, come on. The stuff contained in this book, yeah, your God's existence is a scientific prospect. Like it or not, pal.
For the atheist, there is no basis for this statement other than his or her own perception of evidence that they themselves and their own personal view deem acceptable or unreliable.
So you're saying that believing something on faith, which is, let's face it, basically just making shit up, and actually doing scientific research where you can pick up objects and study them and give that same object to someone else and they can reach exactly the same conclusions you do? You're saying that those two are equivalent, are you? Really? Really?
To remain consistent in the atheist worldview, you must admit that anything is possible.
Even if that were true, and I'm not certain it is, there are some things that have been precluded by other things, rendered impossible. But even if that weren't the case, the fact is that if we have to admit that anything is possible, that doesn't mean we have to admit that it's probable. And God's existence is very, very, very improbable given the evidence.
Not to say that there aren't absolute scientific laws, because there are. It's just that our imperfect perceptions and methods of observation couldn't ever possibly bring us to a perfect, absolute understanding of any of them.
Oh, really? Then tell me something. What on earth makes you think that you have even a chance of a hope of maybe perhaps having a prayer, of knowing the nature of this God creature you claim exists, if As you claim, he, she, it, or they leaves no physical traces, no scientific traces on this earth and is purely spiritual, which you know isn't the case. When you can't have even perfect scientific understanding, when we have actual physical access to the things science studies. You want to claim that a God exists, and you have even less information than science does? How does that make any sense? Oh yeah, it doesn't.
If the hard atheist cannot come up with a basis or a source for that claimed absolute that God does not exist, then they must concede to the fact that they are holding on to it as a personal belief. The view is not based in evidence.
Not based in evidence, you say. But it actually kind of is. It's based in the lack of evidence for your claims. No theist has ever proved that a deity actually does exist. Their claims are all based in faith. And an atheist, hard or soft, just looks at those claims and goes, okay, well, those aren't proved, so you guys are being chowderheads, we're gonna go on not believing.
And I've had a lot of people come back at me with the statement, well, I guess not collecting stamps is a hobby. Really, guys? We can't spot the difference here? This is a terrible analogy that does not fit our situation in any way. The person who is merely not collecting stamps has no stance on this matter of stamps.
Oh, you're one of those. One of those who thinks that atheism and theism have to be mirror images of each other, that they both have to be explicit choices. But they're not. They're not exact opposites. Theists are those who have started to believe in a God. Atheist is anyone who hasn't believed in a God or who doesn't believe in a God. And that can be an explicit choice, or it can come from complete ignorance of the God concept. The fact is that all it takes to be an atheist is to not be a theist. That's it.
They do not hold a certain view on stamps. The concept of collecting stamps is possibly not even on their mind. Their statement that they don't collect stamps is not a statement of their views on stamps, but rather just a statement of their relation to the action of collecting stamps.
Precisely. And as much as you may want it to be one, atheism is not a statement of one's views either. Not necessarily. Atheism is a statement of one's relationship to theism. I am not a theist, therefore I am an atheist. That's what it means.
That is not the case with our issue here. The hard atheist does make a stance.
Well, you yourself said that atheism is a broader category than just the hard atheist.
Now let's talk about the soft atheists. This group will more commonly refer to themselves as agnostic atheists. This group will say, I don't see enough evidence to believe that there is a God. Through this statement, their conclusion must be that there could be a God.
Saying there could be a God makes it sound like we're admitting to a certain amount of probability. But frankly, given the evidence, for and against, I wouldn't put money down on those odds. Not in a million years. I'm more likely to win the lottery 5 times in a row than for God to exist.
The agnostic atheist must say that God is a possibility, but see, I have kind of a problem with this. The problem is that this just doesn't sound like atheism. It sounds much more like agnosticism.
And this is where we start to get into stupid word games. I am both agnostic and atheist. I don't have any knowledge of God's existence. I have a complete dearth of evidence. There's just none there, and thus I don't believe, making me an atheist. You see, if you want to say, oh, this sounds more like agnosticism, so you're not actually an atheist, I'm sorry, I still lack belief, thus making me an atheist. That I'm an agnostic as well changes nothing.
My conclusion here is that the agnostic atheist is somewhat in denial.
And my conclusion here is that you're either engaging in a strawman argument or some hardcore wishful thinking, because that's not the truth of the situation, as I've just explained.
I mean, a case could be made for that just based on the apparent contradiction of terms that makes up their chosen label.
So not only are you engaging in stupid word games, you're also guilty of lazy stereotyping. The fact is that your idea of what an agnostic atheist is doesn't match the reality. I'm an agnostic atheist, and I don't fit your stereotype.
I've had what you might call a revelation of sorts. And that revelation is that evidence doesn't matter. Just hear me out. Because see, the real question here is how much evidence would it take for an atheist to become a Christian?
The question is less how much evidence and more what kind.
And if you're an atheist and you're truly honest with yourself, you will know that that amount of evidence isn't even theoretically attainable because on the balance, evidence doesn't matter to you.
Interesting how this guy knows my mind, knows me so well that he knows exactly how much and what kind of evidence it would take to convince me that the Christian God is real. Of course, he's actually half right. The fact is that the evidence is unattainable because his religion has set it up that way. They've specifically set it up so that their God is out of reach, so that proof isn't possible. It's not my fault. That's their religion.
Say we have affidavits from the 2 Roman guards that were at the tomb who saw Jesus crucified,
taken off the cross, put in the tomb, the stone was rolled in front of it, the seal was placed on the tomb, then they felt the earth shake, saw the stone roll away, saw Jesus step out, fully alive.
and there were witnesses who signed those 2 sheets of paper as well.
Big fat hairy deal. Affidavits aren't proof. I would need scientific, empirical, objective evidence, not hearsay. I mean, I don't even care if those are legal documents. People can still lie. I need something that I can personally check for myself rather than taking somebody's word for it.
That's some pretty substantial evidence.
Maybe if you're a credulous moron, that's substantial evidence, but to those of us who actually care about reality, we need more than just somebody else's say-so.
And why is that not enough evidence that you would have concrete, verified proof of the resurrection?
Because what you just described is not concrete, verifiable proof of the resurrection. It's concrete, verifiable proof that some people signed some documents. You want concrete, verifiable proof? Give me the same kind of scientific proof that showed there were dinosaurs on the earth. Carbon dating, scientific evidence, objective, empirical data. That's what I would need, not signed papers.
Because it's not about evidence. It all comes down to what you believe.
Says the guy whose entire worldview, Christianity, is based on beliefs. It's not my fault you can't relate to those of us who insist on scientific data over faith.
But the same is true for the Christian if we're really honest with ourselves, because even if that amount of evidence existed against the resurrection, we'd still hold on to the resurrection.
Yeah, that's what you do. And it's freaking mental. We don't do that. At least those of us who are logical and reasonable and base our worldview on evidence aren't like that. If someone proves me wrong, I'm glad, because it means that my worldview has been advanced. My knowledge of the universe has gotten closer to a picture of reality rather than some cherished fantasy. I mean, I love my fantasies, don't get me wrong. But I know that they're fictional, and I keep them in that realm. I want to know what's real and what's true in this world. I'm sorry you don't, and I'm sorry you think that I don't, but it's not true. Stop trying to judge me by your substandard standard.
Because even think about this scenario, and I'm talking to the Christians right now. If you were to provide an atheist with enough evidence that they then said, okay, that's enough, I'm going to be a Christian now, I believe because you've given me all the evidence, then a week later they find more evidence in the other side, are they not a Christian anymore? Because we know as Christians from what the scriptures say, that's not the way it works.
What the scripture says? Seriously? Because this is not proof. This is the claim that needs to be proved. I'm sorry, but if I found enough evidence to make me a Christian, and then I discovered evidence that contradicted that evidence, I'm going where the evidence leads, and that would make me no longer a Christian, regardless of what this unproved book says.
No matter how much evidence I produce or how much evidence you produce, we're still going to have the same belief system at the end of the day. And please don't freak out at me right now about calling atheism a belief system. I understand that it is actually a lack of belief. But for the sake of framing these 2 different sides within the argument right now, I'm dismissing certain semantics. And I feel like I have the right to do that. And if you disagree, I don't care.
Yeah, I can see you don't care. And I think you don't care because it helps your argument to ignore certain semantics. Anyway, fellow space travelers, this is BionicDance saying don't run on automatic. Instead, please, think. And remember, if it can't be in your hand, it's all in your head.